Hi guys, today I'll be talking about rule number 5 of the rules of the road. Rule number 5 refers to the rule lookout, and although this rule is very short and very precisely written, I can talk about this for hours together. Alright, so this is like one of the shortest rules in the rule of the road, but each word and each phrase has a meaning that you should conduct an in-depth analysis of. Alright, so make sure when you're trying to understand rules, take apart each and every word and make sure you have a good understanding of each and every word, uh, because this will help you to answer questions in the oral exam as well as in practical application at sea as well. Alright, so this is the best way. There are other videos on YouTube as well where people have talked about, or mariners or master mariners have talked about rule number 5. I encourage you to watch as many videos as possible to get a good understanding of the rules of the road, especially when you go for the oral exam. There is no excuse for you to mess up your rules of the road. Alright, so you might fail in the orals exam, especially even from a practical application at sea. You must understand this rule very well. Alright, so before I proceed with the rules of the road, I must say that this rule basically talks about lookout, and it says that every vessel shall at all times maintain a proper lookout by sight and hearing, as well as by all available means appropriate in the prevailing circumstances and conditions, so as to make a full appraisal of the situation and of the risk of collision. All right, so I have missed a T there in the situation, so of the situation of the risk of collision. All right, so take apart each and every word and try to understand the meaning. I, however, will be covering the rule more on the broader sense, but I will try to emphasize on the important keywords and terms and phrases so that you can understand this rule well. All right, so some of the important things that you have to remember is that this rule places the responsibility mainly on the mariner and to rely heavily on common sense and good seamanship. So rather than specific duties, equipment, places, times, and number of persons, rule number 5 basically requires the master of the vessel to decide how best to maintain a proper lookout. But you, as the officer on watch, have the right to ask the master for additional assistance or any other help required if you feel that the master has not adequately assessed the situation. Your main job as the officer on watch is the master's representative, so you have the right to ask the master for providing you with extra assistance if required and if it is justified in the circumstances. So this rule, instead of giving you precise guidance on the adequacy of the lookout, it sometimes uses vague terms such as proper and appropriate. So we don't know what proper means, what appropriate means in terms of this rule. All right, so they have done this only because this basically then provides for all vessels at all times. So rules of the road, like many of the conventions, many of the maritime STCW, and if you think about it, even if you go through the STCW convention, you will see many of the phrases and terms are a bit vague and a bit broad, and it can lead to individual interpretation. And the reason they do this is because they have to accommodate all kinds of vessels, all kind of states, companies, different kinds of vessels. They have to keep it on a broader sense so that it covers everybody. It cannot make it very specific, or else some of the vessels may not be able to comply with this. All right, so like I said, if you are able to comply with the steering and sailing rules, uh, you will have no doubt to meet the demands of this rule. So a proper lookout needs to provide all the information needed to comply with basically the steering and sailing rules. So like, overtaking situation, crossing situation. So if the lookout is aware and provides the information to the officer on watch, then the rules will be met. If the information collected by the lookout is insufficient, then the officer on watch or the master must intensify his or her own lookout efforts. All right. Of course, you should also be keeping a lookout. You should not only rely on the lookout. If you are the officer on watch, I'm assuming here you are the officer on watch or you are the master, and you need to have all available means to you, such as RPAS and radars and AIS and all the other things, binoculars, so that there is no information gap between what the lookout tells you and what you have comprehended in the situation. This information gap sometimes opens between the amount of information collected and the amount needed to comply with the other rules, and this is a leading cause of most collisions. So too often vessels collide because their masters have either ignored the gap or have filled it with their own assumptions. So this rule basically tells you that you should not make assumptions. You should use all available means to gain by lookout is to gain a mastery of the situation, to have situational awareness, to understand what is happening around your vessel and whether there is any risk of collision or not. All right, so let's start with each and every word, and if I can emphasize here. So what is a lookout? So if you think about it, it is not a person who just stands outside the bridge wing or is inside the bridge wing. It's just a person extra other than you as an officer watch. If that person is just standing there and looking outside and looking into the horizon, that doesn't mean that it's a lookout. All right, so this perception is misleading. Just because somebody is standing and looking at the horizon, that person might be lost in their own thoughts, thinking about their own family. As it is when we are on the ship, we think about a lot of other things other than what we are supposed to be doing many a times, not always, but many a times. So you have to make sure that the lookout who is with you and the officer on watch is aware of his or her duties. All right. So the term that is used by these rules denotes not a person, but rather the systematic collection of information. That is what the lookout means. So responsibility for maintaining a proper lookout lies with the vessel's operator, that is you as the officer on watch, and not with the person who's designated as a lookout, not as the seaman who's just standing there. All right. So if you are the officer on watch, you are the lookout manager. You are supposed to be directing to the lookout as to what is to be required or what is to be done. If the officer on watch can keep a lookout personally, then coordinating the collection and analysis of information is relatively straightforward. It's only you. You are basically analyzing the information that you are faced with, and you are taking action based on that. But if you are the officer on watch is a decision maker and you must rely on others to gather the information, then the management of a proper lookout becomes more complicated. The officer on watch must ensure that information on the vessel's surrounding is detected in a timely manner, promptly communicated, so that he or she can correctly analyze the situation and take action based on it. The purpose of the lookout is simple, so it can easily be overlooked sometimes. So as the purpose of the navigation rules is to prevent collision, it follows that the purpose of the lookout is to collect the information needed to avoid collision. This fundamental reason for maintaining a proper lookout is something to keep in mind. So the duty of the lookout, now traditionally the duty of the lookout was to watch out for vessels, lights and other vessels, or other objects such as reefs, shoals, islands, by sight and hearing alone, and to report the presence to the vessel's officer on watch. The lookout was allowed some discretion on what to report in crowded waters or vessels or waters of high traffic, and would be assigned no other duties that would interfere with this important function. Although the traditional principles of the lookout are still pertinent, today's mariners has tools available that greatly extend the distance over which the information can be detected. Today, a proper lookout is a team effort between the officer on watch and the person designated as the lookout. So you must ensure that each member of the lookout is competent in the use of the equipment and diligent in the performance of duty. Alright, so make sure that you have provided specific instructions to your lookout as to what has to be reported to you, how it should be reported, how it should be detected, how to keep them active on duty. Sometimes they might be just standing there and lost in their thoughts. Make sure that you are engaged with the lookout. Alright, so lookout is also engaged in their duties. What are the tools available for a lookout? Of course, you can list some of these yourself. So sight, hearing and all available means as mentioned in the lookout are basically tools of the lookout. Some of the tools could be binoculars, RPAS, radars, VHF communications, sight, hearing and AIS. Now why I say VHF communications is, and many times many officers do not allow their lookouts to come and have a look at the radars or RPAS. Do not be like that. You can allow them, because sometimes they may be in doubt whether they should report something or not. But if they come and have a look in the radar, they can gain a good understanding of the situation, and they can go out and actually start looking out for vessels that they see on the radar, especially sometimes when the visibility is not good. Hearing VHF communications also helps them to understand if there are any nearby vessels around which they should be looking out for. Sight and hearing, of course, are equally important. So not only should they rely on their eyes, but also on their ears, especially when it's restricted visibility, areas of fog or mist where other vessels are not clearly seen. They can rely on the fog signal of the other vessels. AIS, these days also automatic identification systems where other vessels can be seen, is also a very good tool today for lookout. Alright, now remember, human sight and hearing of course have their limitations. Nearsightedness may be uncorrected or poorly corrected. Even good eyesight is affected by environmental factors such as light, weather conditions, sea sprays, winds, strong winds, right? Fatigue can also affect vision, especially on the ships when people are very tired. Maybe they have been keeping port watches and then the vessel sailed out, then they've not had good sleep, they may be tired. That can also affect on their vision, on your hearing, as well as condition to keep a lookout. All right, so even the noise of wind and waves and ship's machinery sometimes doesn't allow you to hear the signals. Sometimes the blast from your own vessel, so if your vessel is transiting in a narrow in a restricted visibility area and you are sounding your own fog signal, that also hampers the lookout from hearing other signals. All right, so in all circumstances you must use all available means, so that you can make a good assessment of whether any nearby vessels are there or whether there is a risk of collision. So most vessels, of course, these days are fitted with RPAS and sophisticated radars. All right, but still, there are many collisions that are occurring. So why these collisions are occurring, and many of them are occurring in the night time, especially because I think people are not keeping a proper lookout. So a lookout may check an empty radar screen and believe nothing is there because he or she can't see anything. What may happen is that although that a weak contact with a small nearby vessel was lost, when the radar operator twisted the sensitivity knob to reduce the sea surface clutter. Collisions occur because radar observers rely on capabilities the radar does not have. So excessive reliability on a radar is not a good lookout. That means you are using only one means, you are not using all available means. Alright, so a lookout may observe a contact on radar, begin to form a mental picture of the other vessel, and possibly then make a course change. Alright, make sure that you check your radar settings as well. Many times if the radar settings are not proper, then you cannot maintain a lookout through the radar, because in restricted visibility sometimes you have to rely only on RPAS and radars, and at that point of time when your sight is not useful, although a sight should still be maintained, lookout by sight, but sometimes if it's not useful, then of course you have to rely on RPAS and radars. But if the settings are not very good, then of course you cannot keep a proper lookout through the radar, you cannot rely on the radar. Alright, so I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to distinguish between an assumption and fact in your decision making. So make sure that you confirm before you start to act. Consciously seek out, and do not unconsciously suppress, conflict the evidence which you may have got from the radar. It is difficult to calculate mentally another vessel's relative course and speed after observing a radar blip 2 or 3 times only. Alright. Some of the mariners believe that radars and RPAS are not necessary on clear nights, yet collisions continue to happen in those conditions. Many of the companies and many ships have sailed on. The culture was not to keep the radar switched on, and that's not a good culture. Radars should be kept on, at least one of them. RPAS should be kept on at all times, even during the day, because sometimes you are distracted. Sometimes you should not be distracted, but sometimes you may get distracted with other duties, and sometimes you may not pick on other vessels by sight. So that is the point of time when the RPAS and radars are very useful. Alright, apart from that, of course, listen to the VHF communications, listen to the communications that's happening around you, use the side by side, I means you should have a 360-degree vision, and similar with hearing as well, with AIS as well, you can detect the other vessels which are coming towards you. Allow your lookout or your designated lookout to also access these tools, because they can use these tools to make an assessment of their own and then provide you or supplement you with some information as well. All right. Prevailing circumstances and conditions, and again I can talk hours on this, but I don't want to waste too much time here. So basically a proper lookout is that which is sufficient to prevent a collision without any allowance for any kind of good luck in the prevailing circumstances and conditions. So think about a lookout in the open ocean, which may be less intense than one in the coastal waters or inland waters. However, it cannot be abandoned because even in the middle of the ocean, collisions have occurred. Lookout on a vessel at anchor is also required, of course with the level of effort depending upon the location of the anchorage, depth of water, type of the tackle, the prevailing weather conditions of winds, winds, currents and waves. The lookout's additional duty could also be to determine whether the anchor is dragging and warn the other vessels of the anchor's vessel's presence. Alright, means and method of maintaining lookout may also vary with night and day. At nights, lookouts should make greater use of binoculars and radars, and officers on watch should post observers away from the vessel's own lights so as not to impair the night vision of the lookout. During the day and in good visibility, a vessel can be seen at a much greater distance, if the visibility is good, of course, and sometimes that's why it's only the officer on watch who's maintaining the lookout at the bridge. Alright, but if required, make sure if the traffic maybe at open sea, if there is too much traffic around, although the visibility may be great, having a lookout then helps in the assistance, or sometimes you can use the lookout for steering purposes and then you maintain the lookout. All right, so never hesitate to ask for assistance if required. And the size and arrangement of a vessel also has a direct bearing on the effort required to maintain a proper lookout. Now, on smaller vessels, when there is an unobstructed all-round view and where there is no impairment of night vision, the craft and the officer on watch may both steer and keep the lookout as well. But this is not possible with bigger ships. All right, unobstructed view, simple controls, and high maneuverability become very important in such cases. So that's why this thing is possible only in smaller vessels where the lookout and the steering man is still the same. But I'm assuming that you guys are sailing on bigger ships, so that should not be the case. Visibility becomes very important, whether the visibility is good or not. So as soon as you start suspecting that the visibility is not good, even though if it's the daytime, make sure that you ask for assistance, you ask the master for assistance, or if you are the master, then provide assistance to the officer on watch on the bridge. All right, area of operations matter a lot as well, because sometimes you may be transiting areas which are prone to piracy or robbery, or you might be anchored in such an area. Then this also makes a difference. This also contributes to the prevailing circumstances and conditions. Finally, we come to the last bit of the rule, which talks about full appraisal of the situation and risk of collision. What does this mean? So this is very important because it is a broad objective that you should keep in mind when managing the lookout. All right, so basically you should ensure that there's enough information always available to you to assess the situation, and you should tap into all your resources to gather more information if you can. If you are still unable to acquire all the information you need, then you should take steps immediately to reduce your requirement for information. For example, you can slow down the vessel or you can stop the vessel, as it is mentioned in rule number 18. So rule number 18 says that if required, you can take all the way off. That means you can stop if you are unable to assess the situation. So do not take action. I repeat, do not take action based on scanty information that can lead you to worse trouble. Always make sure that you have assessed the situation using all available means. You have confirmed and reconfirmed it before deciding on an action, because tomorrow if you take an action based on scanty information and then run aground or run into an accident, the court of law, even in the court of law, you will get into trouble. All right, so you will not be able to justify as to why you took action. However, on the other hand, if you use all available means and you can justify your action based on all the information that you collected, and even then you get into trouble, at least in the court of law, you can justify your action and you can provide evidence of how you used all available means to take action. So that is why this rule is very important. I can talk more about this rule, I can talk about each and every word, but then this video will become very long. So I suggest you watch my video, watch other videos, talk to other people, start scrutinizing each and every word and what it means and what it could stand for, and then you have a good understanding of this rule. So I hope you like this video, and I look forward to your comments, and please subscribe to get notification on further videos as well. See you soon, guys.